Okay, welcome to this week's Parsha's Balak. Ms. Hashem, my wife and I are making a chasna on Wednesday, all being well, b'shat tov u'mutzlachas. Our daughter is getting married. So I thought, obviously that's what's percolating in my mind. And the Parsha Shiur this week is themed in a way, related to the theme of weddings and marriage. Because last Thursday night, I wanted to catch up and spend some good time with my daughter. So we went out for a late night coffee last Thursday night. And my daughter said to me, "Dad, do you have any tips? What would you recommend? Any marriage tips?" So that was an interesting question. And what I said is not for now. But one thing which is important, and that is this: when, please God, all of you at the right time, when you date, I once heard from Shimon Weingarten. He once said there are three things to look for. When you're looking for a future spouse to share your life with, there are three things you need to look for. Number one is midas. Number two is midas. And number three is midas. And that's something which really appears in this week's Sedra. How so? Let's take a look. Look at the first box. There's a famous Mishnah in Pirkei Avos which we read yesterday. The Mishnah says in Pirkei Avos, Perek Hey, Mishnah Yutes, Kol mi sheyesh biyado shleisha dvarim halalu. Anyone who has the following three attributes. Mitalmido shel Avram Avinu, he is a student of Avram Avinu. V'shleisha dvarim acherim, mitalmido shel Bilam HaRasha, he is a student of Bilam. What are the three? Ayin tova. If a person has a good eye, a positive perspective, v'ruach nemoicha, and he has a lowly spirit, v'nefesh shfala, and a humble approach, mitalmidav shel Avram Avinu, then he is a student of Avram Avinu. However, ayin ra, if he has a negative, critical eye, v'ruach gevaya, and a very arrogant spirit, v'nefesh rechava, and a greedy, boastful attitude, then mitalmidav shel Bilam HaRasha, then he is a student of Bilam. Ma bein talmidav shel Avram Avinu le talmidav shel Bilam HaRasha. What are the difference between the students of Avram and Bilam? Talmidav shel Avram Avinu eichen be'elam hazeh v'neichen be'elam haba. And the Mishnah goes on and says that the Talmid of Avram Avinu, they not only enjoy this world, but they enjoy the world to come as well. Okay. A famous Mishnah in the fifth Perek, Mishnah Yutes, Perek Hey Mishnah Yutes of Pirkei Avos. Now, three questions I want to ask on this Mishnah. Question number one: if I were to ask you to describe the difference between Avram Avinu and Bilam, I wouldn't have said these three things. I would have said, what? Avram Avinu and Bilam, how can you compare the two? They're poles apart. Avram Avinu he discovered the Kodesh Baruch Hu. He is ultimately the founder of Yiddishkeit. Not only that, he's the founder of all monotheistic religions in the world. The Pasuk says, not only did he introduce us to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the Pasuk says he kept everything. He was one of the others. The Pasuk says in Bereshis, the first, if you're listening online, email me at j.golker@gmail.com, I'll send you the handout. The first bullet point in box A is Ekev asher shama Avram b'koili v'yishmesh mishmarti mitzvosai chukoisei v'seirosai. And Chazal explain that he kept everything, even the mitzvah Rabbanan. Yeah, the example they gave is Erev Tavshilin. And he did so in a world which was full of idolatry. So, you're comparing him to Bilam. Number two, he says about Avram Avinu, Avram Ha'ivri he's known as, and the Medrash says in Bereshis, Rabbi Yehuda Omer, Kol ha'olam me'eveh echad v'hu me'eveh echad. He's on one side, everyone else is on the other side. So do you understand who Avram Avinu is? He's going against the whole culture of the day. And Bilam, on the other hand, how can you compare the two? Bilam, he lived in a generation which saw the Yad Hashem in Mitzrayim, Kriyas Yamsuf, and he still behaved in this very debased way. In a very debased way. If you look in the Gemara in Sanhedrin, it describes it in more detail. So, if I were to try and describe Avram Avinu, I would tell you, well, you can't really compare the two. You've got Avram Avinu, who's one of the Others, one of the Kedoshim, one who's changed the whole face of the world since he walked it, introduced us to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the founder of our religion, the founder of all monotheistic religions. He kept Torah in its entirety. He went against the whole attitude, the whole attitude of the world, of an idolatrous world. And Bilam, on the other hand, did exactly the opposite. He lived in a world where there were sort of nisim geluyim, and yet he still behaved, and he discarded it and behaved in a very debased way. So how on earth can you compare them? So why does our Mishnah choose to describe these three midas and these three criteria as the difference between Avram and Bilam? That's question number one. Question number two, the Mishnah seems very verbose, very lengthy in words. If you look at the Rabbi Yonah asked the kasha. Rabbi Yonah says, the Tana of this Mishnah in Pirkei Avos could have been much more short. He shouldn't have been marich with a klal of prat. In other words, look how he starts. Kol mi sheyesh biyodei shleishet dvarim halolu mitamid hashav raminu. For kol mi sheyesh leishlo dvarim harim mitamid hashav raminu. What are the three? It's a very wordy way of saying it. As the Rabbeinu Yonah says, the Mishnah could have just simply said, Kol mi sheyesh biyodei ayin tova or ra'ah rach gavoya nefesh rechava tamid hashav bilam harasha v'lo matana derech klal v'hodem mefarish derech prat. Why are you giving these general rules and then you focusing on the detail of the midas? It seems a very lengthy way to describe, to make the point he's trying to make. And the third question is often asked on this Mishnah is this, that the Mishnah then finishes off and says, Ma bein talmidim shel Avram Avinu talmidim shel Bilam harasha. What exactly is the difference between the talmidim of Bilam and Avram? Well, what do you mean? You just told us the difference. The difference is that Avram Avinu's talmidim have ruach, ayin tova, ruach nemoicha, nefesh shefela, and Avram Avinu's, and Bilam's has the opposite. Ayin ra, ruach kavod, nefesh rechava. So you just told me the difference. So why does the Mishnah then go and say, Ma bein talmidim shel Avram Avinu, talmidim shel Bilam harasha? So those are the three questions on the Mishnah. Question number one, why do we dafka choose this way to define the difference between Avram and Bilam? Number two, why is the Mishnah so verbose? And number three, why does the Mishnah then finish off and says, Ma bein talmidim shel Avram Avinu, talmidim shel Bilam harasha? You just told us the differences. Strong questions. The Rabbeinu Yonah explains that these three midas really encapsulate all midas tovas and emphasize that essentially, when you drill down, that is the key difference between the two of them. In other words, the Mishnah is not focusing on the actions and the legacy of Avram Avinu. That's self-evident. That's, of course, obvious. What Avram Avinu did is life-changing and world-changing forever. But it's focusing on not the actions, but the nature and the character of these two people, of Avram and Bilam. Now, what does that mean? Let's explain this a little bit more. Avram Avinu is described in the Novi, in Yeshaya, as Avraham Oihavi. He's the beloved of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, because of his midas. Bilam could have been as great as Avram, but he failed because of his corrupt midas. You see that everything depends on midas. That if a person has good midas, then all the actions and the positive things will flow from that. If a person has negative midas, then all the terrible things will flow from that. The starting point is midas. The Bilam, he could have been as great as Avram Avinu. It was the response to the Ummah Ha'olam saying, "Hey, you've got a Moshe Rabbeinu. Why don't we have someone like that?" They had a Bilam. He was potentially he could have been as great, but he failed because of the corrupt midas. Bilam, as the pasuk says in the Gemara Avodah Zarah, says that he wanted to die like the others, but he wanted to live like the way he lived. He wanted to, like the Gemara says in Avodah Zarah, Chaf Yamud Aleph, each of the Sfarim, each of the 5 books of Torah has got a name. The name for Sefer Bereshis is Sefer HaYasha. The Gemara says in Avodah Zarah, Chaf Yamud Aleph, my Sefer HaYasha, Rabbi Chia Baba and Rabbi Yochanan, Zeh Sefer Avram Yitzchak Yaakov, Shenikru Yesharim. How do I know they were called Yesharim? Because of Bilam. Because it says, D'chsiv behu, Thomas Nafshi Mois Yesharim, V'tiach Harisi Kamayhu. That Bilam said, I want to die Mois Yesharim, i.e., that I want to die like the others and reside with them in Gan Eden, but he lacked the strength of character to live like their lofty lives. Now, if you think about it, a person's character, his midas, ultimately affects his belief. And this is the important part. You see, with the Meraglim, their personal interests causes them to speak badly about Eretz Yisrael. Kairach, it was jealousy another bad midah, which motivated him to rebel against Moshe and Aaron. And Bilam, it was the greed which led him to attempt to curse Klal Yisrael. There's a very famous Rabbi Chanan. Take a look at the bottom box of the page. Very, very important and famous Rabbi Chanan. The pasuk says, "Lo yisasuru achrei levavchem v'achrei einechem." Don't follow your heart and your eyes. Asks Rabbi Chanan and many others that should it not have said, "Lo yisasuru," don't stray. What do you mean after your heart? Don't stray after your mind. The moyach surely is the giving you the thoughts to pursue these terrible things. So take a look at this Kovis Mamor, a famous piece in Rabbi Chanan. Look at the bottom box. Lo yisasuru achrei levavchem zu minus. This is referring to apikoros, to warped theology. Gemara in Brachos based on base. Surely, having erroneous, heretical thoughts is a result of intelligence and seichel and the brain. Surely that's in your head, not in your heart. So the pasuk should have said, it's not v'lo yisasur acharei levavchem or einechem. It should have said lo yisasur acharei daitchem v'reishchem, says Rabbi Chanan. Kosav Rambam. So listen to this. The Rambam says in Sefer HaMitzvahs, mitzvah rishona leida lahamin b'Kadosh Baruch Hu. The first mitzvah is to believe in Hashem. V'tzorich lahavin eich shaykh mitzvah lahamin. Famous question of Chanan and others: how can you command on ultimately an emotion or a feeling? I can understand you can instruct, shake the lulav, don't shake the lulav. Eat the matzah, don't eat the matzah. Because that's in your hands literally, and you can do it or not do it. It's not something which you can just press a button and do. And if he has them, you don't need to instruct the guy to do it. So what's pshat? I'll give you a mashal. You've got some magnets and you've got some metal. The nature is that the magnets and the metal are going to pull together. But if you take that metal and you cover it with sawdust and with cotton wool and with bits of wood and other things, the more you wrap it and cover it, the less the connectivity between the magnet and the piece of metal. That's just the nature of it. And therefore, the pull towards it is frustrated the more barriers there are. Every one of us has an neshama which is pulling towards HaKadosh Baruch Hu. We want to do the right thing. We want to be over HaKadosh Baruch Hu as best as we can. The difficulty is that sometimes wrapped around our lives all the nonsense that sort of stifles that connectivity. And therefore Rabbi Chanan is saying that ultimately all intelligent minds recognize and accept the existence of a creator and of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. But the negative forces in man, bad midas, pride, greed, lust, drive for power, laziness, interfere with the conclusions of the mind. And therefore, essentially, what the Rabbeinu Yonah is saying in explanation of this Mishnah is this. Do you know the real issue, the real difference between Bilam and Moshe and Avram Avinu? The real difference between Bilam and Avram Avinu is midas. Because they both have the potential, they both have the neshama and the want and the desire and the ability to connect properly. But if midas are lacking, then that's going to frustrate Bilam in achieving what he could have achieved. And therefore, when the Mishnah says, Kol mi sheyesh biyod sheyesh t'varmalol mitamidash Avram Avinu v'sheyesh t'varmalol, etc., he's really telling us that this is the key difference. The key difference is not on what they achieved and not in their actions and in their legacy, but the real root of the difference is the difference in midas between the two of them. That Avram Avinu was able to polish his glass so it was so pristine that there was no barrier, as it were, that he was able to connect fully to HaKadosh Baruch Hu and achieve what he achieved. But Bilam is so wrapped up and so stifled by all the dross that has covered him that he is going to behave in that very debased way. And therefore, it's telling me a bigger picture, a bigger rule. It's not just telling me these are the differences. It's telling me this is the difference between Rishoim and Tzaddikim. And that's why it chooses these particular ways of describing them. So I think the concept and the importance of Midas Tovas is something which really emerges from this Mishnah, from this week's Sedra. And it goes to the very root of, if a person has good Midas, good character traits, then the positivity, the midas, and the life and the actions will flow from that. Let me just share with you one more idea. This also again resonated with me in the context of Mitzvah Hashem, the week ahead. Take a look at this. Look at paragraph 2, please, and we'll finish with this. The pasuk says, "Vayishlach malachim el Bilam ben Ba'ar." At the beginning of the Sedra, "Vayishlach malachim el Bilam ben Ba'ar pesayra she'al hanahar eretz b'nei Amoy likreloi leimer." Hine, am yotzim Mitzrayim. So Balak sends a message to Bilam. There is a people that came out of Egypt. Hine kiso esein haaretz v'hu yoshev mumuli. They've wiped out the land. They've eaten the land, and they're there in front of me. But if you notice, the way Balak describes it to Bilam is am yotzim Mitzrayim. But then, if you fast forward a few psukim, the pasuk says, "Vayomer Bilam el Elokim." Bilam says to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, "Balak ben Sipar melech Moav shalach elai. Hine ha'am hayotzei miMitzrayim." There is a nation which is leaving Egypt in the present tense. Vayechas esein haaretz, ata lecha kavoli, etc. So the Moshe Feinstein picks up on this. Look at this. Look at what he says in the Drash Moshe. Balak oma yotzom miMitzrayim, uBilam oma hayotzei miMitzrayim. Balak uses the past tense and Bilam uses the present tense. Venira says Ramosha, Ki Balak choshav she'am Yisrael kechol ha'amim. Balak thought the Klal Yisrael are like any other nation. Asher roitzim la'ashkiach ma shehoya koidem. They want to forget about their past. They don't want to be anchored to it and limited by it. Shehoyu am u'melucha. U'bilam yoda ki hu sheloi kechol ha'amim. Balak thought their past is their past. They now want to live in the present. They have nothing to do with their past, and therefore Am Yotzim Mitzrayim. That's consigned to history. That's how they look at their past. But Bilam understands that the Jewish people are not like any other nation. Ela adarabba la'olam yedu sheyotzim Mitzrayim, that they know that they came out of Egypt. U'kafi shebe'emes mechuyavim anu lizkar Mitzrayim ki geirim hoyin nisham. That we really, says Ramosha, that Bilam's correct, his perspective was correct. That we're not a people that came out and we forget about it, but we are coming out because we live with the legacy of Mitzrayim. We very much remember the past. V'zeu chashivas lebnei Yisrael, shlochein efshe sheyashpiuk al kol ha'olam kuloi, sheyilamdu mehem v'yichnu tachas mamleches kahanim v'ketusha shel Yisrael. In other words, Bilam is telling Balak, this is not a people that just forget about their past. On the contrary, they take their past and they bring it into their present and into their future. And that's why Bilam changes the lashon from Yotza to Yotzim Mitzrayim. And then he carries on there, and Bilam. And therefore, Bilam was very scared. And therefore, that is really the nature of the Jewish people. We don't forget our past. We take our past and we build it on for the future. You know, I thought of that from a famous Gemara in Brachos. The Gemara says in Brachos, "Kol hanene misudas chason." Anyone who benefits from the suda of a chason, of a wedding, and eina mesamchay, then is over chamisha kolos. He violates 5 kolos, kol soson, kol simcha, etc., etc. But if he's mesameach the chason and kala, ki'ilu bona achas mechuvus Yerushalayim, then it's as if he's built one of the destructed ruins of Yerushalayim. So, some of you last week were doing work experience. Some of you said they worked in property companies. When you, in the world of construction, if you want to build, you don't build on a ruin. The way you do it is you totally get rid of everything. You actually dig deep foundations and then you build. You don't build on churbanos. So what does the Gemara mean that kol hanen misudas chason mesamchay kilu bona achas mechuvus Yerushalayim, as if he's rebuilt on the churvas of Yerushalayim? So Dan Ehrentroy used to say on this Gemara, a very beautiful pshat. When you go to a chasna, the young couple they're not discarding their past, their history, their ancestry. They're actually building on it. They're actually taking the legacy of their forebearers and of their grandparents and their parents, and they're building on that. That's really what a chosn and kala are doing. And that's what the Gemara is saying. You're rebuilding on the churva because you don't just destroy old buildings. You actually are building on the old buildings, as it were, metaphorically, that you're building on your history. And that's really what Bilam recognized. That we're not an who is Yotze Mitzrayim, that we just discard our history and consign it to the history books, but rather, as Bilam correctly pointed out, Hine ha'om hayotzim Mitzrayim. This is, take care of these people. Because these are people who come out of Mitzrayim, they have not discarded their past. On the contrary, they're taking their past and they're bringing it into their present, into their future. And therefore, as Moshe says, Bilam was very worried. And that's what the hope for all of you, and the hope for a young couple as they get married is you're rebuilding on the past. You're taking our glorious history and trying to project it forward into a very beautiful future.